They looked at her hoodie and saw a thug. They looked at her skin and saw a trespasser. When the flight attendant sneered, "This cabin is for elite passengers only," she didn't know she was speaking to the woman who was about to sign the airline's $700 million survival check. Elara Vance didn't scream when they dragged her off Flight 902. She just tapped her screen. One phone call. That was all it took to freeze an entire fleet, bankrupt a CEO, and turn a snobby socialite's vacation into a federal crime scene. This is the story of how arrogance cost an airline everything. The recycled air inside John F. Kennedy International Airport always smelled the same, like floor-wax stale coffee and high-octane stress. But for Elara Vance today was supposed to be quiet. Elara adjusted the noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, pulling the hood of her oversized vintage college sweatshirt further down over her forehead. She wasn't trying to hide exactly. She was just tired. At 26 years old, Elara was the silent majority shareholder of Vance Hargrave Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in saving dying industrial giants. She had spent the last 72 hours in a windowless boardroom in Manhattan negotiating the restructuring of a failing logistics company. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. All she wanted was the lie-flat seat she had paid $15,000 for a glass of champagne and silence until the wheels touched down in London. She approached the gate for Stratford Airways Flight 902. Stratford was a legacy carrier, the kind that prided itself on British heritage oak-panelled lounges and a strict adherence to hierarchy. Elara handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a tired-looking woman named Brenda. Brenda scanned the pass. The machine beeped a pleasant green. "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance. You're in 1A. First class is boarding now." "Thank you," Elara murmured, grabbing her beaten-up leather duffel bag. It was Italian leather hand-stitched worth more than most people's cars, but it was worn in a way that made it look vintage rather than flashy. She walked down the jet bridge, the cool air hitting her face. She was the first to board a perk she usually enjoyed. She stepped onto the plane, turned left, and found seat 1A. It was a sanctuary of cream-colored leather and polished walnut wood. Elara tossed her bag into the overhead bin and collapsed into the seat. She didn't wait for the flight attendant to offer a drink. She just closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a week. The peace lasted exactly 4 minutes. The thumping of footsteps down the aisle signaled the arrival of the rest of the first-class cabin. Then a shrill, piercing voice cut through Elara's music. "I specifically told the concierge I wanted the bulkhead. How is this hard to understand?" Elara opened one eye. Standing in the aisle was a woman who looked like she was wearing her entire net worth. She was draped in a leopard print coat that looked synthetic, clutching a bright orange designer bag with a logo so big it was practically shouting. Her blonde hair was teased into a helmet of hairspray. This was Patricia Halloway. Trailing behind her was a teenage girl who looked mortified, staring at her phone, and a man who looked like he had surrendered his will to live about a decade ago. Patricia stopped dead in her tracks when she looked at seat 1A. She looked at Elara. She looked at Elara's hoodie. She looked at Elara's sneakers. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice dropping an octave into a tone of icy condescension. Elara paused her music and slid the headphones down to her neck. "Yes?" "You're in my seat," Patricia stated. She didn't ask. She declared. Elara blinked. "I don't think so. I'm 1A. She pointed to the little plaque on the wall. That's impossible, Patricia snapped, shifting her weight to one hip. 1A is the VIP seat. It's always reserved for prominent travelers. My husband is a Platinum Diamond member with Stratford. We always sit in row 1. Well, today you're not, Elara said calmly, sliding her headphones back up. Check your ticket. Patricia's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with her orange bag. She turned to the flight attendant, a tall, nervous man named Stephen, who was trying to arrange welcome drinks on a tray. Excuse me, steward, Patricia barked, snapping her fingers. Stephen rushed over the champagne glasses, clinking dangerously. Yes, Mrs. Halloway. Wonderful to see you again. Stephen, why is there a person in my husband's seat? She gestured vaguely at Elara, as if Elara were a stain on the upholstery. I told the booking agent explicitly that we needed the first row. We are travelling to the gala in London. We cannot be separated, and I certainly won't have my husband sitting behind someone who looks like she snuck in from the cleaning crew. Elara felt the heat rise in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd been profiled. When you're young, black, and dress for comfort rather than a runway, people assume things. Usually she let it slide. She knew who she was. She knew her bank account balance had more commas than a Dickens novel. But she was tired. Stephen looked at Elara, then at his manifest. He looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said to Elara, his voice polite but strained. Could I see your boarding pass, please? Elara sighed. She pulled her phone out, unlocked it, and held up the digital pass. Elara Vance, seat 1A, first class. Stephen looked at it. He nodded. Mrs. Halloway, she is in the correct seat. Perhaps you and Mr. Halloway could take 2A and 2B. They are identical seats. I don't care if they are identical, Patricia shrieked. The rest of the cabin was filling up now. Businessmen in suits were staring. It's the principal I paid full fare for this trip. Do you know who my husband is? He owns Halloway dealerships. We are not sitting in the second row, while some affirmative action lottery winner takes the prime spot. The cabin went silent. The insult hung in the air like toxic smoke. Elara took off her headphones completely. She stood up. She wasn't tall, only 5'4", but she carried herself with the weight of a titan. She looked Patricia dead in the eye. I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago, Elara said, her voice low and steady. I paid $15,000 for it. I didn't use miles. I didn't use a discount. I paid cash. Now, if you don't mind, I have a meeting in London that determines whether this airline can afford to pay for the fuel to get us there. So sit down. Patricia gasped, clutching her chest. Are you threatening me? Did you hear that Stephen? She threatened me. She said something about fuel. Is she a terrorist? I didn't say, Elara started. She's threatening the flight, Patricia screamed, escalating the situation instantly. She's unstable. Look at how she's dressed. She's probably on drugs. Get her off this plane immediately or I am calling the police. Stephen looked panicked. He wasn't equipped for this. He keyed his radio. I need the gate agent to the aircraft. Immediately. We have a disturbance in first. Elara sat back down, shaking her head. She had no idea that the man walking down the jet bridge, Greg Bradford, was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. Greg Bradford didn't like his job, but he loved the power. He was the lead gate supervisor for Stratford Airways at JFK, a title that came with a polyester blazer and the authority to ruin people's days. He was having a bad week. His metrics were down, and corporate was breathing down his neck about on-time departures. When the call came in about a disturbance in first class, Greg saw it as an opportunity to flex. He stormed down the jet bridge, his walkie-talkie crackling on his hip. He entered the cabin, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw Mrs. Halloway, standing in the aisle, looking like a victimized pheasant. He knew the Halloways. They were frequent complainers, but they spent money. Then he saw the girl in 1A. Hoodie, leggings, sneakers, headphones. Greg didn't need to ask questions. He had already decided what the narrative was. It was a classic case of an economy passenger trying to poach a seat during the boarding chaos. "What's the problem here?" Greg asked, his voice booming. "This woman is refusing to move," Patricia said, pointing a manicured finger at Ilara. "And she made threatening remarks about the plane's fuel. I don't feel safe flying with her. My daughter is terrified." The daughter in question was scrolling through TikTok, completely ignoring the situation. But Greg didn't look at her. He looked at Ilara. "Ma'am," Greg said, stepping into Ilara's personal space. "I need you to grab your things and deplane. Now." Ilara looked up at him. "I have a ticket. Seat 1A. The flight attendant already checked it." "I don't care what you have," Greg spat. "The captain has authority over this vessel, and I am his proxy on the ground. We have a report that you are being disruptive and making threats. That is a federal offense." "I didn't make a threat," Ilara said, her hand tightening on her phone. "I said I have business with the airline, and if you remove me, you are going to regret it." Greg laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Is that another threat you want to threaten an airline employee? Do you know I can have the port authority here in 3 minutes to arrest you?" "Check my name," Ilara said, extending her ID. "Just check the manifest properly. Not just the seat assignment. Check the VIP notes." "I don't have time for your games," Greg said. He reached up and slammed the overhead bin shut, then grabbed Ilara's leather bag from the open one next to it. He threw the bag into the aisle. It landed with a heavy thud near Patricia's feet. "Hey!" Ilara shouted, unbuckling her seatbelt. "That is property destruction." "And you are trespassing," Greg countered. "You are delaying this flight. Every minute we sit here costs this airline thousands of dollars. You are obviously distressed and not fit to fly. Now you can walk off, or I can have 2 officers drag you off in handcuffs in front of everyone. Your choice, sweetheart." Ilara looked around the cabin. The businessmen were avoiding eye contact. Patricia was smirking, a look of pure, triumphant malice on her face. Stephen, the flight attendant, looked at the floor, too cowardly to intervene. Ilara realized something. There was no winning this in the cabin. If she fought, she would go to jail. If she screamed, she proved them right. She needed to go nuclear. But to go nuclear, she needed to be off the plane. She stood up slowly. She picked up her bag from the aisle, dusting it off. She looked at Patricia. "Enjoy the seat, Mrs. Halloway," Ilara said softly. "I hope it's worth it." Then she turned to Greg Bradford. She pulled out her phone and held it up where he could see the screen. She wasn't recording. She was dialing. "Mr. Bradford, is it?" she asked, reading his name tag. "That's right. Supervisor Bradford." "Okay, Supervisor Bradford. You're removing me from Flight 902. You are citing disruptive behavior and security threats as the cause. Is that your official stance?" "Get off my plane," Greg growled, pointing to the door. "Okay," Ilara said. She began walking toward the exit. "But I want you to remember this exact moment, because in about 10 minutes, you're going to wish you had just checked my ID." Ilara walked off the plane. Behind her, she heard Patricia Halloway cheer. Finally. Some standards. "Stephen, bring me a mimosa immediately." Greg Bradford followed Alara up the jet bridge, practically herding her toward the gate counter. He was feeling good. He had solved the problem. The wealthy frequent flyers were happy. The riffraff was gone. He typed into the computer at the gate podium, "Passenger removed. Disruptive. Security risk. Banned from rebooking." He watched Alara walk over to a quiet corner of the waiting area near the window. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just put the phone to her ear. "Yeah," Alara said into the phone. Her voice carried across the quiet gate area. "It's Alara. Get me Arthur Pendleton on the line. No, I don't care that it's 2:00 a.m. in London. Wake him up. Tell him the $700 million liquidity deal is dead unless he answers the phone in 30 seconds. Greg Bradford paused. He hovered over the keyboard. Arthur Pendleton. The name sounded familiar. It took him a second to place it. Arthur Pendleton was the global CEO of Stratford Airways. Greg felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. He looked at the girl in the hoodie. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her watch, counting down the seconds. 20. 19, she whispered. Greg's finger hovered over the confirm removal button. Suddenly, he wasn't so sure he wanted to press it. The silence in the gate area was heavy, broken only by the hum of the vending machines and the distant announcement of a flight to Dubai. Greg Bradford stood 10 feet away from Alara Vance, his finger hovering over the computer terminal, paralyzed by doubt. He watched Alara. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't shouting for a manager. She was leaning against the cold glass of the terminal window, looking out at the Boeing 707 that was currently being loaded with baggage that likely contained the suitcase of the woman he had just ejected. Alara spoke into her phone, her voice dropping to a register that was terrifyingly calm. "Arthur," she said, "I'm at JFK, Gate 42. I was just physically removed from Flight 902 by your ground staff. I was told I was a security risk because I didn't look like a first-class passenger." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Even Greg, standing a distance away, could hear the tinny, frantic squawk of a voice on the other side. "Yes?" Alara continued examining her fingernails. "They threw my bag. They threatened me with arrest, and the reason given was that a platinum member wanted my seat. Arthur, I'm looking at the term sheet for the Series C liquidity injection right now. Paragraph 4, subsection B. Material adverse change. Do you recall that clause?" Greg felt his stomach drop. He didn't know finance, but he knew the tone of someone who held a detonator. "I am invoking it," Alara said. "The deal is off, Arthur. I'm freezing the $700 million. I'm instructing the legal team at Vance Hargrave to pull the term sheet immediately. You have until the market opens in New York to find another savior. Good luck with the bankruptcy filing." She pulled the phone away from her ear to hang up. "Wait." The voice on the other end was loud enough now that Greg could hear it clearly. It was a desperate, primal scream. "Alara, don't hang up. Please, Jesus, tell me you're joking. That money is the payroll for next month. If you pull out, Stratford ceases operations in 10 days. I'm not joking, Arthur. I'm standing in the terminal like a fugitive while your staff treats me like garbage. Why should I invest nearly $1 billion in a company that profiles its own board members? Who did this?" Arthur Pendleton roared. The CEO of Stratford Airways, usually a man of composed British stoicism, sounded like a man watching his house burn down. "Give me a name, Alara, right now." Alara looked up. She locked eyes with Greg Bradford. Greg was sweating now, profusely. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He wanted to run, but his feet felt like lead. "His name is Greg Bradford," Elara said, holding Greg's gaze. "Lead gate supervisor." "Put him on," Arthur commanded. Elara walked over to the podium. The few other passengers waiting for the next flight watched in fascination. She held the phone out to Greg. "It's for you," she said. Greg's hand trembled as he took the sleek black iPhone. It felt heavy. Hello?" Greg stammered. "Supervisor Bradford speaking." "Bradford?" The voice on the line was low, shaking with suppressed rage. "This is Arthur Pendleton. Do you know who I am?" "Yes, Mr. Pendleton, sir." "Good. Now listen to me very carefully, because the next 60 seconds will determine whether you have a future in the aviation industry, or if you'll be lucky to find a job sweeping floors at a bus station. The woman you just removed is Elara Vance. She is the managing partner of Vance Hargrave Capital. She effectively owns the mortgage on every single plane in our fleet. Did you check her VIP status?" I... Greg's throat went dry. He looked at the screen he had ignored. He quickly tabbed over to the passenger manifest, clicking on Elara's name. A pop-up box appeared. It was bright red. "Status VIP. Board member level. Do not downgrade. Do not rebook. All requests granted. Net worth verification. $4.2 billion. Greg felt the blood drain from his face. He felt dizzy. I see it now, sir." "You see it now?" Arthur screamed. "You idiot! You just cost this airline its lifeline. You prioritized a car dealership owner over the woman who pays for the fuel. Fix this, Bradford. You fix this right now." The plane is pushing back, sir," Greg whispered, looking out the window. The tug was already moving the massive aircraft away from the gate. "The doors are armed. We can't—" "I don't care if the plane is halfway to London," Arthur yelled. "Turn it around! I am calling the tower. I am grounding Flight 902. You are to get Ms. Vance back on that plane. You are to upgrade her to whatever she wants, and you are to grovel Bradford. You are to beg. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Greg squeaked. The line went dead. Greg slowly handed the phone back to Elara. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. Elara took the phone and slipped it into her pocket. "Well, Greg swallowed hard. "I need to make a call to the ramp." He grabbed the radio mic, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it once before keying it. "Tower, this is gate 42. Ramp control. Stop the pushback on flight 902. Repeat, stop pushback. Return to gate immediately. Captain's orders. Corporate orders." "Copy that, gate 42. The radio crackled back, sounding confused. "What's the reason, mechanical—" Greg looked at Elara. She raised an eyebrow. "No," Greg said, his voice cracking. "VIP retrieval. We left someone behind." Inside the cabin of Flight 902, the mood was celebratory, at least in row 1. Patricia Halloway was on her second glass of pre-flight champagne. She had spread out, placing her orange handbag on the empty center console between seats 1A and 1B, effectively annexing Elara's former space. "See Stephen," Patricia said to the flight attendant, who was busily trying to ignore her while prepping the galley. "It's about standards. You let one person like that in, and the whole atmosphere is ruined. It's better for everyone that she's gone." Stephen forced a smile. "Can I get you a warm nut mix, Mrs. Halloway?" "Yes, and bring one for my husband. He's stressed." The plane had pushed back and was beginning its taxi toward the runway. The safety video was playing on the screens. Suddenly, the plane lurched. The engines, which had been winding up, spooled down to a low whine. The aircraft came to a shuddering halt on the tarmac. A murmur of confusion rippled through the first-class cabin. "What is it now?" Patricia groaned, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "We're already 10 minutes late." The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds from the flight deck." The pilot's voice was smooth, but there was an edge of tension in it. "We've just received an urgent order from our operations center to return to the gate. We have a critical passenger situation that must be resolved before we can depart for London. We apologize for the inconvenience, but this comes from the top. We'll be back at the gate in 5 minutes." "Unbelievable." Patricia threw her hands up, nearly knocking over her champagne. "A critical passenger. Did someone forget their passport? Why do we have to suffer?" She looked out the window as the jet bridge began to extend toward the plane again. "I'm going to write a letter about this. This airline is going to the dogs." Outside, inside the terminal, the atmosphere had shifted from a quiet waiting area to a war room. Greg Bradford was no longer the man in charge. He was cowering behind the podium. Standing next to Alara was the station manager, Sarah Jenkins, who had sprinted from the other side of the terminal in 3-inch heels after receiving a terrifying email from the CEO. Sarah was pale. She looked at Alara with a mixture of awe and terror. "Miss Vance," Sarah said, breathless, "on behalf of Stratford Airways, I cannot apologize enough. This is a catastrophic failure of protocol. Mr. Pendleton is on the video line with the board right now." "I don't want apologies, Sarah," Alara said coolly. "I want my seat." "You have it," Sarah promised, "and we have cleared the entire cabin for you if you wish. We can remove other passengers." "No," Alara said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I don't want you to remove anyone. I want everyone to stay exactly where they are. I want to walk back onto that plane, and I want everyone to see exactly who holds the power here." "Understood." Sarah nodded. The jet bridge door opened. The plane was reconnected. Captain Reynolds stood at the aircraft door looking confused. He saw his station manager and a young woman in a hoodie. "What's going on, Sarah?" Reynolds asked. "Center said to turn around for a code black VIP." "Who is it, the president?" "This is Ms. Vance," Sarah gestured to Alara. "She owns the company, Captain, or she will if we treat her right. She was wrongfully offloaded by Bradford." The captain's eyes widened. He looked at Greg Bradford, who was staring at his shoes. The captain understood immediately. "Miss Vance!" Captain Reynolds tipped his hat. "Welcome aboard. Again. Please allow me to escort you personally." Alara nodded. She picked up her battered leather bag. "After you, Captain." The procession was something out of a movie. The captain walked first, clearing the path. Alara followed, head held high. Behind her came the station manager, carrying Alara's duty-free bag, and finally a dejected Greg Bradford, who had been ordered to come along to apologize in person. They stepped onto the plane. The first-class cabin went silent. Patricia Halloway, who had been loudly complaining to her husband about the delay, froze with a nut mix halfway to her mouth. She saw the captain. Then she saw Alara. "You!" Patricia shrieked. "What are you doing back here? I thought we got rid of you." Alara didn't say a word. She stopped at row 1. She looked at her seat 1A. Then she looked at Patricia's handbag, which was sprawled over the console. "Captain," Alara said softly. "Yes, Miss Vance." The captain replied, his voice booming in the small cabin. "I believe this passenger is confused about the seating arrangements, and I believe she has violated the airline's code of conduct regarding harassment of other passengers." The captain turned to Patricia. His face was like stone. "Mrs. Halloway." "Yes," Patricia stammered, looking between the captain and Alara. "Captain, this woman was removed. She's a security risk. Why is the plane turning around for her?" "This plane turned around," the captain said, his voice loud enough for the business-class passengers behind them to hear. "Because Ms. Vance is the majority shareholder of this airline. She effectively owns this plane, Mrs. Halloway, and she has informed us that she was racially profiled and harassed by you." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The businessmen in row 3 started whispering furiously. Majority shareholder. Vance Capital. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She owns... "Yes," the captain continued, "and Miss Vance has made a request. She is willing to let the flight continue so that these other good people can get to London. But she has one condition." Alara stepped forward. She leaned down so her face was inches from Patricia's. "I don't feel safe flying with you." Alara repeated the words Patricia had used earlier. "You're disruptive. You're aggressive. And frankly, you don't look like the kind of person who belongs in my first-class cabin." Alara stood up and looked at the station manager. "Sarah." "Yes, Ms. Vance. Remove her." "What?" Patricia screamed. "You can't be serious. I paid full fare." "Refund her," Alara said, bored. "And ban her. Life ban. On all partner airlines, too. I don't want to see her face on a plane ever again." "No." Patricia grabbed her husband's arm. "Harold, do something. They're kicking us off." Harold Halloway, who had been silent for the entire ordeal, looked at Alara. He looked at the furious captain. He looked at the station manager, who was tapping on an iPad. He was a car dealer, but he knew when he was outmatched. Harold slowly peeled Patricia's fingers off his arm. "Harold," Patricia whispered, "I have a meeting in London, Patricia." Harold set his voice quiet. "I can't miss it. You're staying." "I am," Harold said, sinking back into his seat and putting his noise-cancelling headphones on. Alara smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "You heard the man," Alara said to the security guards who had just boarded behind Greg. "Escort Mrs. Halloway off the premises." As Patricia was dragged kicking and screaming about lawsuits and discrimination down the aisle, passing the very seat she had tried to steal, Alara sat down in 1A. She settled in. The leather felt softer this time. She looked up at Greg Bradford, who was still standing there, trembling. "Miss Vance," Greg choked out. "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I was just—" "Greg," Alara interrupted, pulling her headphones back out. "You're still on my plane. Get off, and leave your badge at the desk. You're fired." She put her headphones on. She didn't watch him leave. She just closed her eyes and waited for the champagne. The cabin of Flight 902 had settled into a fragile, terrifying silence. The air pressure was stable, the engines hummed with a reassuring consistency, and the smell of warmed rosemary nuts and expensive scotch filled the air. But the tension was thick enough to choke on. Alara Vance sat in 1A, her laptop open on the tray table. She wasn't watching a movie. She was watching a live ticker of the London Stock Exchange. Stratford Airways ticker STFD was bleeding. The graph was a steep red cliff dropping vertically. In the 45 minutes since the plane had taken off, the stock had plummeted 14%. The market had caught wind of the rumor. The liquidity deal was frozen. The sharks were circling. Elara took a sip of her sparkling water. She felt eyes on her. She turned her head slightly to the right. In seat 2B, directly across the aisle from where his wife had been screaming 30 minutes ago, sat Harold Holloway. He was staring at Elara. He looked like a man who had just realized the life raft he jumped onto was also leaking. He cleared his throat. It was a wet, nervous sound. "Miss Vance," Harold whispered. He leaned across the aisle, trying to be discreet, so the other passengers wouldn't hear. Elara didn't look up from her screen. "Mr. Holloway, I'm working." I just wanted to apologize again," Harold stammered. "For Patricia. She can be excitable. She has high blood pressure. Sometimes she doesn't know what she's saying." Elara finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. "She knew exactly what she was saying, Harold. She called me a thug and a security risk because I was wearing a hoodie. That's not high blood pressure. That's prejudice." I know. Harold waved his hand dismissively, as if racism were a minor accounting error. "But look, we're businessmen, right? Or business people. I own Holloway Automotive Group. We're the largest luxury dealership network in the tri-state area." "I know who you are, Harold," Elara said, her voice flat. "Right. Well, I was thinking, this whole thing, it's a misunderstanding. And I saw you on the phone with the CEO. I just want to make sure. You know, no hard feelings between us." Elara closed her laptop slowly. The click echoed in the quiet cabin. "Harold, why did you stay on the plane?" Harold blinked. "Excuse me." "Your wife was removed, distraught, humiliated, probably crying at the gate right now, waiting for her luggage. And you stayed. You chose the flatbed seat and the filet mignon over your marriage. Why?" Harold shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. "Well, like I said, I have a meeting. Critical supply chain issues with the new European imports. If I don't make London, I lose the Q3 allocation. So money comes first," Elara summarized. "It's not just money, it's responsibility," Harold argued weakly. "I agree." Elara nodded. "Responsibility is key, which is why you should know something about your critical supply chain meeting." She tapped a few keys on her phone and turned the screen toward him. It showed a corporate dossier. "Holloway Automotive Group operates on a revolving credit facility to purchase inventory," Elara recited from memory. "You borrow cash to buy the cars from the manufacturers, sell them and pay back the loan with interest. It's a standard floor plan financing model." "Yes," Harold said, looking confused. "That's standard industry practice. Do you know who underwrites your floor plan loan, Harold?" Harold frowned. I think it's managed by Highland Bank." "Highland Bank," Elara corrected, "is a subsidiary of Vance Hargrave Capital. We acquired them 6 months ago." Harold went pale. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "I own your debt, Harold," Elara said softly. "I own the cars on your lot. I own the mortgage on your showroom in Jersey. And I have a clause in our lending agreement regarding reputational risk to the parent company." "Miss Vance, please." Harold's voice cracked. He was sweating now, wiping his palms on his expensive slacks. "I stayed. I didn't support her. I sat down. You stayed because you're a coward, Harold. You let your wife abuse a stranger, and you only stepped in when you thought you'd get kicked off, too. That's not the kind of character Vance Hargrave likes to partner with." "What are you going to do?" Harold whispered, terrified. "I'm going to enjoy my flight," Elara said, opening her laptop again. But when we land, I'd suggest you call your CFO. I'm initiating a full audit of your dealership's creditworthiness. If I find a single penny out of place, well, you might be flying economy on the way home." Harold slumped back into his seat, devastated. He stared at the ceiling, looking like a ghost. Suddenly, the onboard flight phone at Alara's seat began to buzz. It wasn't a standard call. The light was flashing red. "Priority patch. Cockpit." Alara picked up the handset. "Vance. Ms. Vance. It was Captain Reynolds. I have Arthur Pendleton on the sat link. He says it's a life-or-death emergency. He's pleading to speak with you. Shall I patch him through to your handset?" Alara sighed. She checked her watch. They were 3 hours from London. "Put him through, Captain." A click, a hiss of static, and then the frantic voice of the CEO filled her ear. "Alara. Thank God. Are you okay? Are they treating you well?" "The service is adequate, Arthur. The champagne is a little warm, but I'll survive." "Why are you calling me?" "The stock, Alara. Have you seen it?" Arthur sounded like he was hyperventilating. "We're down 20%. The trading algorithms picked up the projected bankruptcy signal when you froze the funds. We have creditors calling in loans. The fuel suppliers in Tokyo just put a hold on our account. If you don't release a statement right now, we won't have an airline by the time you land." "That sounds like a you problem, Arthur," Alara said calmly. "It's our problem. You're a shareholder." "I can write off the loss," Alara said ruthlessly. "Vance Hargrave is diversified. We have healthcare, tech, real estate. If Stratford Airways goes to zero, I lose a tax bracket. You, however, lose everything. Your pension, your reputation, your legacy. You'll be the man who crashed a 100-year-old airline." "What do you want?" Arthur begged. "Name it. Anything. Do you want a seat on the main board? Do you want the chairman ousted? Do you want free flights for life? Just tell me." Alara looked out the window at the clouds stretching endlessly beneath them. "I don't want perks, Arthur. I want blood. Blood. I want a complete overhaul of your customer service protocols. I want the algorithm that flags security risks, audited by an independent firm of my choosing to remove racial bias. I want Greg Bradford's termination to be public, with the cause listed explicitly as discrimination. And I want Patricia Halloway banned from every airline in the One World Alliance. I want you to personally call the other CEOs and make sure she never flies above cargo class again." "Done," Arthur said instantly. "I'll draft the press release now. I'll have the legal team on the alliance ban. What else?" "And one more thing," Alara said, looking at Harold Halloway, who was currently weeping silently into a hot towel. "Yes." "I want you to meet me at the gate when we land, with the entire board of directors. We're having an emergency meeting in the Heathrow lounge. If everyone isn't there, the deal stays frozen." "At the airport. But it'll be 4:00 a.m. on a Sunday." "Then you better start waking people up," Alara said. "See you in London, Arthur." She hung up the phone. She looked across at Harold. He was shaking. "Miss Vance," he whispered, "are you really going to ruin me?" Alara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Harold, you stood by and watched your wife treat me like an animal. You thought your money protected you. I'm just showing you that there's always a bigger fish. Now eat your nuts. We're beginning our descent soon." Heathrow Airport usually felt like a chaotic mall, but at 5:30 a.m., the VIP Windsor suite was a tomb of silence and anxiety. The flight had landed smoothly. The jet bridge had been attached with the precision of a surgical procedure. While other passengers were held back, Alara Vance was escorted off the plane first. She didn't have to go through customs with the masses. A private black car was waiting on the tarmac at the bottom of the stairs to whisk her to the private terminal. As the car drove across the wet tarmac, Elara checked her phone. The internet was on fire. Someone in row 3, a teenage girl, had uploaded a video to TikTok. It was titled, "Karen tries to kick black billionaire off plane gets instant karma." The video showed Patricia screaming Greg Bradford being aggressive, and then the glorious moment the captain announced Elara owned the plane. It had 14 million views in 6 hours. The comments were brutal. "Stratford Airways is done. Imagine being that gate agent. Who is she?" "She's a queen." Elara put the phone away as the car pulled up to the private entrance of the Windsor suite. The door was opened by a man in a tuxedo. "Miss Vance, they are waiting for you in the conference room." Elara walked in. She was still wearing her hoodie leggings and sneakers. She hadn't changed. She wanted them to see her exactly as she was when they tried to throw her out. She pushed open the double oak doors. Inside, sitting around a massive oval table, were 12 men and women in immaculate suits. They looked exhausted. Coffee cups littered the table. Ties were loosened. The air smelled of fear. At the head of the table stood Arthur Pendleton. He looked 10 years older than he had in his official headshot. "Elara," Arthur said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "Thank you for coming." Elara ignored his hand. She walked to the opposite end of the table and threw her battered leather bag onto the polished wood. It slid across the surface, stopping inches from a glass pitcher of water. She remained standing. "Sit down, Arthur," she commanded. The CEO sat. "Let's review the last 8 hours." Elara began pacing slowly behind the empty chair at the head of the table. "Your stock is down 22%. You are trending on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as the face of corporate racism. And your liquidity deal, the only thing keeping this airline from insolvency, is currently sitting in my drafts folder, waiting for me to hit delete." A woman halfway down the table spoke up. It was Margaret Sterling, the head of PR. "Ms. Vance, we have drafted a very strong apology. We are framing this as a rogue employee incident. Greg Bradford acted alone. We can spin this." Elara stopped pacing. She looked at Margaret. "A rogue employee?" Elara laughed. "Margaret, do you know why Greg Bradford felt comfortable throwing me off that plane? Because your algorithm flagged me. I saw his screen. It said, 'Risk factor high.' Do you know why?" I'm not technical," Margaret stammered. "I am," Elara said. "I had my team look into your code while I was in the air. Your security system flags passengers based on visual compliance. It uses facial recognition at the kiosk. It flagged me because my hoodie and my skin color didn't match the demographic profile of a first-class passenger in your database. Greg didn't act alone. Your computer told him to do it." The room went dead silent. The board members looked at each other in horror. That can't be true," Arthur whispered. "It is," Elara said. "And if I release that data to the press, you won't just go bankrupt. You'll be sued into oblivion. The Civil Liberties Union will have a field day." "What do you want, Elara?" The chairman of the board, a heavy-set man named Lord Cavendish, spoke up. His voice was gravelly. "You didn't fly here to lecture us. You flew here to make a deal. What is the price to turn the money back on?" "The price has gone up," Elara said. "We agreed on 700 million for 15% equity," Lord Cavendish said. "That was yesterday," Elara replied. "Today the brand is damaged. The asset is distressed. I'm not paying 700 million for 15%. I'm paying $700 million for 51%. Gasps erupted around the table. 51%, Arthur shouted. That's a hostile takeover, or you'd control the board. You'd control everything. It's not hostile. Arthur, Elara said calmly. It's a rescue. You have two choices. Choice A. I walk out that door. I tweet the screenshot of your racist algorithm. The stock hits zero by noon. You all lose your jobs, your stock options, and your reputations. Choice B. You sign over majority control to Vance Hargrave Capital. I inject the money. I fire the tech team. I rebrand. And I save your jobs conditionally. This is blackmail, someone muttered. This is business, Elara corrected. You profiled the wrong passenger. You thought I was nobody. Now you know I'm the owner. That's the cost of arrogance. She pulled a document from her bag and slid it down the table toward Lord Cavendish. The contracts are already drawn up. My lawyers worked on them during the flight. Sign it, and the money hits your account in 10 minutes. Don't sign it, and I advise you to update your LinkedIn profiles. Lord Cavendish looked at the document. He looked at the live stock ticker on the screen on the wall, which was still showing a red arrow pointing down. He looked at Arthur Pendleton, who had his head in his hands. Lord Cavendish took a gold pen from his pocket. We have no choice, Cavendish muttered. He signed. Elara watched the pen move. The stroke of ink that transferred a century-old British airline into the hands of a young black woman in a hoodie. Wise decision, Elara said. She tapped her phone. Money is released. You can tell the markets. Arthur looked up, tears in his eyes. What are you going to do now? Now. Elara checked her watch. Now I'm going to have a shower. Then I'm going to check on my other investment. Other investment, Harold Holloway. Elara smiled. He arrived on the same flight. I believe he's currently in baggage claim, trying to figure out why his corporate credit cards have been declined. She turned to leave the room. Oh, and Arthur. She paused at the door. Yes, Miss Vance. Next time I fly. She pointed to her hoodie. I'm wearing sweatpants. Make sure the crew knows that's the new uniform of the owner. She walked out. The fluorescent lights of Heathrow's Terminal 5 baggage claim hummed with a headache-inducing brightness. For Harold Holloway, the world was spinning. He stood by the carousel, watching the same black suitcase circle for the third time. It wasn't his. He was too distracted to grab his own bag. He was staring at his phone. He had just tried to pay for a private car to take him to his critical meeting in the city. The transaction had failed, declined. He tried his corporate Amex, declined. He tried his personal Visa, refer to issuer. His phone rang. It was his CFO, a man named Miller, who usually only called with good news. Today, Miller sounded like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Harold, Miller's voice was shaking. Where are you? I'm in London. Miller, my cards are down. Call the bank. Tell them it's a travel flag error. It's not a travel flag, Harold, Miller whispered. It's a seizure. Highland Bank just called the loan. The entire floor plan facility. $80 million. They invoked the immediate repayment clause based on a material breach of character and reputation stipulation. Harold felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the handle of a baggage trolley to hold himself up. What they can't do. That clause is for criminals. For fraud. They sent over a file, Harold. It contains a video of your wife screaming racial slurs at the chairman of Highland Bank's parent company. and it contains a statement from you, logged by the flight crew refusing to intervene. They're saying the Holloway brand is toxic assets. They've frozen the operating accounts. We can't make payroll on Friday. We can't buy cars. We are done. Harold dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. He had stayed on the plane to save the business. He had abandoned his wife to secure the deal, and in doing so, he had lost both. He looked up and saw a news broadcast on the airport TV. The ticker at the bottom read, "Stratford Airways shares rebound after mystery billionaire takes control. Vance Hargrave Capital pledges new era of inclusivity." He saw a photo of Elara Vance. She wasn't smiling. She looked like Judgment Day. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away at JFK, the karma was hitting even harder. Patricia Holloway was standing at the counter of a budget airline, the only one she hadn't insulted yet. Her mascara was running. Her orange bag was scuffed. "I just need a ticket to London," she screamed at the agent. "My husband is there. I need to get to him." The agent typed in her passport number. The screen flashed a hard, unforgiving black box. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the agent said, looking up with a mixture of confusion and pity. "The system won't let me issue a ticket." "Why not?" "It says you are on the global watch list for the Alliance. Code 99, aggressive passenger/security threat. It says you are banned from flying with any carrier that code shares with Stratford American or British Airways." "But that's all of them," Patricia shrieked. "How am I supposed to get to Europe? I suppose you could take a boat, ma'am." The agent shrugged. "Next in line, please." And in the employee parking lot, Greg Bradford was sitting in his car. He had a cardboard box on the passenger seat containing a stapler, a photo of his dog, and his now deactivated badge. He was scrolling through LinkedIn. He had already tried to change his status to open to work. But the comments on his profile were flooding in. The video had gone viral. Everyone knew his face. Everyone knew his name. Is this the guy who kicked off the owner? Good luck getting a job, buddy. Greg put his head on the steering wheel and wept. He had followed the rules, or so he thought. He had followed the bias, and it had cost him his career. Back in London, Elara Vance stepped out of the shower in the ultra-exclusive lounge. She put on a fresh set of clothes, clean sweatpants, and a fresh white t-shirt. She checked her portfolio. Stratford Airways was up 8%. Holloway Automotive was trending toward bankruptcy. She picked up her bag and walked out to her waiting car. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel giddiness. She felt the heavy, satisfied weight of balance restored. They had tried to remove her from seat 1A, so she removed them from the sky. As she got into the car, the driver looked in the rearview mirror. "Where to Miss Vance?" Elara put her headphones on. "The future," she said. "Drive." And that is how one phone call took down an entire airline hierarchy. It's a brutal lesson, isn't it? Patricia and Greg saw a hoodie and assumed thug. They saw skin color and assumed poverty. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they didn't realize they were picking a fight with the woman who signed their paychecks. Elara Vance didn't just win a seat. She bought the whole game. It proves that in today's world, real power doesn't always wear a suit and tie. Sometimes it wears sneakers and beats you at your own game. What would you have done if you were Elara? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have pressed the nuclear button like she did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story about billionaires' betrayal and big-time revenge. See you in the next video.